everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our webinar on employee retention and creative and pragmatic ways to address it. I'm Dr. Donnelly, and we are the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. And we're excited to be able to talk to you today. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started.
So you're very welcome to this webinar, and in case you're wondering if you're in the right place, I kind of feel like this is one of those moments where in college, if you went into the wrong class and you realize as soon as the lecturer starts talking, like you're in the wrong, oh no, this isn't the right class, I read the wrong room number. So you're in the right room, you're in the right place if you are looking for pragmatic approaches to solving your retention issues. If you are aware that your current retention programs might not be working at their best. If you're worried that you might have bigger problems than retention, you're in the right place. And honestly, if you're looking at building a more resilient organizational culture, you're here in the right place with us, the Good Doctors. So just a quick reminder, be sure to stick with us all the way to the end of the webinar in order to stay registered for our drawing to win a free 2-on-1 strategy session with us, the Good Doctors, which is a $450 value. So be sure and stay tuned all the way to the end to make sure that you're in the running for that awesome prize.
So who are the Good Doctors? That is a fantastic question. If this is the first time we're meeting each other, it is delightful to make your acquaintance. So I'm Kristen, and that's Erin, and we call ourselves the Good Doctors because we are, in fact, doctors. We both have PhDs from the Queen's University, Belfast in Northern Ireland. Mine's in sociology and Erin's is in anthropology, which is a lot of ologies. We recognize that. But essentially what it means is that we are trained by some of the best minds in the world to analyze organizations, systems, and humans, and kind of how all three of those work together really, really quickly in a variety of settings. Between the two of us, we have over 30 years of combined experience in business, research, and people management in a variety of settings, both in America and abroad. And what we are able to do is bring a really fresh analytical approach to what appear to be really commonplace business problems. But we believe that even though something happens everywhere, doesn't mean that it is commonplace or simple to solve.
That's right. So what are we going to talk about in today's webinar? Obviously, the title of our webinar is dealing with pragmatic approaches to employee retention. So we will get to those. We're going to talk about a few case studies, and we're going to break down the key elements of our retention philosophy that we think can help you directly apply that philosophy to the way that you approach your retention programs.
So the first thing that we wanted to just do a disclaimer right out of the gate, let's get it out of the way. This is not a panacea of perfection. There is absolutely no way to fully control employee retention. There's not. There's always circumstances that happen that you don't know about or that throw you for a loop. And that's one of the reasons that we actually think resiliency is so important. We don't talk about strong or weak cultures. We talk about resiliency because you can't plan for everything. And resiliency allows you to adapt and react in a way that strength does not. So for example, Abbey Research is part of a larger network of companies of which my family owns them all, and I have leadership responsibilities in them all. And last week in one of our other divisions, a employee that by all external measures was staying with us for the long haul, really committed, we thought, and ripe for growth, turned in her 2-week notice. And it just hit us all by surprise, for sure. But because we had taken a lot of opportunity to put those resilient building blocks in place, we knew the questions we had to ask immediately, the things we needed answers for. We knew the kind of person that we wanted in that role next, not a carbon copy of the current employee, but now that the company has evolved past from who we were when she was hired, there might be new roles, and we knew those questions to ask. And so we were already able to make a new hire, set ourselves up for a really smooth transition and success. But if we didn't have those building blocks in place, if everything had been built around this person, this individual, instead of the culture of the organization, we would have been screwed, y'all. So this is something that comes from this conversation today, we take really seriously because it comes from a really fresh place of use.
So you are probably here if retention is one of the issues that you're currently facing with your organization. And we believe, as our philosophy at Abbey Research, in addressing the root cause for every problem. But newsflash, if retention is your problem, low retention or high turnover, you might also be having, and you probably are having, problems in these other areas, because your organizational culture is a large system in which all of these interconnecting parts are working with each other. So you could also be having problems with employee engagement, employee physical health and mental health, customer and client satisfaction. If your employees aren't happy, they might not be serving your customers and clients to the level that you expect. You could have decreased productivity, decreased profitability, and also you could be suffering from the big business buzzword, the toxic culture, the big looming toxic culture, which we break down into a myriad of issues around harassment, bias, discrimination, interpersonal conflict, interdepartmental conflict. These are all issues that could be contributing to and suffering from your retention rates and this constant change of new employees that you're dealing with.
So here's what you came here for, a couple pragmatic approaches. So there are, as Dr. Hinson just said, there are so many issues that affect this. So what we're going to do is really focus on two. We're going to give you some case studies, and we're going to give you some really quick ways that we think you can fix this like immediately. And so please don't hesitate to ask questions in the chat box as we go along. But here are some quick and easily applicable pragmatic approaches.
So for us, one of the first things we found in our research that might be one of the easiest ways to make quick change on your retention strategies is to look at your hiring process and the ways in which you're communicating job positions to people, how you bring people in, how you interview them, what questions you ask, what expectations you have of the talent that you're bringing in. All of this could be contributing to the type of people, obviously, that you're bringing into your organization, which would have an impact on turnover and retention. So what we found is that organizations really should emphasize the character, the personality of their new talent that they're looking for, as much as when you're looking to just fill the skill for that role. And Dr. Donnelly even mentioned that with the practical example she gave you from her work for our parent company, in which they knew the character of the person and they had already, as an organization, decided what type of person they wanted in that role, not just somebody that matched the skill set. So we really believe that this will give you more control over your changing culture. And the first case study example that I want to give you is from streaming overlord Netflix. And you may have heard them mentioned a lot recently because there's been a lot of talk about particularly their culture deck, which is a deck of cards, a slide, a PowerPoint slide presentation that they use to communicate their culture and their cultural ideals to their new staff. So what I found when researching Netflix was that they have a very clear definition of what their culture is. And they communicate this definition exceptionally clearly and thoroughly through this culture deck. I think it has about 125 slides in it. So they are thorough in their communication. And they talk about as well, when they look at bringing on new hires at Netflix, 9 behaviors and skills that they look for. And this really helps them focus on finding people of character, finding people of a level of maturity that they know that they can handle the tasks that they will be assigned in whatever position they're looking to fill. They've also adopted several what would be considered progressive practices and policies. They're, I believe, one of the first organizations to offer 1 year of paid maternity and paternity leave. So some of it is incentivizing new hires with these more progressive policies. but they also really focus on developing great leadership and great managers. And they focus on that from the hiring process so that the leaders can continue to communicate these cultural values to their employees throughout the duration of their time as employees at Netflix. And our second example comes from Dr. Donnelly's hometown team, currently still the reigning Super Bowl champs until the next Super Bowl in a couple of weeks, the Philadelphia Eagles.
Fly, Eagles, fly. A little bit passionate around here about our Eagles here at Abbey Companies. But as Dr. Hinson alluded to, we are currently the reigning Super Bowl champions. And to a certain extent, no one was more surprised about that than us. As a city, because we were not a team known for cohesion or resiliency or anything else until we got our newest coach and current coach, Doug Peterson. And this past summer, I had the privilege of listening to a leadership talk from Howie Roseman, who is our general manager, and talking about the differences in the hiring process between our previous coach, Chip Kelly, and our current coach, Doug Peterson. And he said with Chip, they really just looked at all of his stats. In the same way that, like with job interviews, you look at all the qualifications. But as our company president, and my father always says, if they're in the door, they have the skills. That's a non-negotiable. That's not the conversation. By the time they get to the interview, the conversation isn't about skill set. It's entirely about character. And how often we forget that. And the Eagles certainly did. They say they didn't talk to anybody. They didn't really check his references. They let his statistics on the field stand as his references. And for anyone who followed football in like 2012 to 2015, you'll know that that went terribly for us. When they were ready to hire Doug Peterson, they talked, he says, Howie Roseman said, they talked to everyone who had ever met him, his garbage man, his fourth grade teacher, his pastor, his ex-girlfriends. They talked to anyone who would talk to them to find out what kind of dude this guy was. Because if he was even in the conversation for the running of the job, they knew he could do the job. The question was, could they be the man they needed him to be? They knew that they needed somebody who would understand the relationship of this team to this city, the man who would lead the locker room, things like that. And in last year, in all the Super Bowl media, I remember that one of the reporters asked Malcolm Jenkins, who's one of the leaders of our team, how they were all working so well together. There's a lot of political and religious divides in our organization. The locker room is a really, really big melting pot of America. And somebody said, man, how do you guys all get along? And Malcolm said, there are lots and lots of differences, but there are no divisions. And he credited Coach Peterson as one of the major ways to do that. So we would encourage you to think about that. You can't talk to everybody your person's ever met, but you can certainly ask character questions. You can certainly ask questions about stress management. You can ask how they like to be told that they're doing something wrong. You can ask all sorts of questions like that to find out it's not if they're going to be a good employee or not. It's whether or not they're going to be a good employee for you. Because this is an incredibly important question financially as well as emotionally. The average cost to replace an employee is 21% of that person's salary, and it goes up for C-suite executives when you talk about bringing in headhunters and recruiters. Then you're talking about 30 to 40% of their current salary. Y'all, that is a lot of money. Absolutely no one has 21% of someone's salary to waste on their books, and if they do, I have some land I have an island off the coast of New York for them to buy, as the saying goes. Changing your culture will always cost less than changing an employee. So make sure that the root cause analysis of why they're leaving is thorough and you know it's not a culture problem before you do anything else.
So the second example we want to use in talking about immediate changes that you can make for your retention programs and your retention strategy is instilling a belief in the culture. And the first statistic I have up on this slide is really shocking. 50% of employees in a recent survey feel that they have different values than their employers. And that is a massive, massive problem when you're thinking about how you would motivate somebody to stay with your organization. If they don't believe that their values are matched by the people that they're working for, they're going to start looking for other places that match those values pretty quickly. So one of the most effective ways to increase retention is to ensure that you have a value-driven culture. And that we kind of got that example even from the last case study with Netflix and their culture deck, and the Philadelphia Eagles and their hiring practice, and how their value-driven culture is communicated. So you should really reflect this in your mission statement from the beginning. And the case study that I have is from the food producing juggernaut here in the United States, Whole Foods. And there was a recent study done from Johnson & Wales University that identified the main drivers for Whole Foods' really high retention rate. They have one of the highest retention rates for American companies. And this team of researchers, postgraduate students at Johnson & Wales, decided, let's see if we can find out why this is. What are they doing that's keeping people in their jobs? So one of the things they found was that they're creating a value-driven culture, which means that they are matching their business strategy with the values that they have for the goals for their organization. And they're communicating that for their team. They're also empowering their team in the decision-making process on the ground in their stores. So you're getting that built-in trust with your people. You're trusting their ability to contribute to the decision-making process and to make decisions. That's going to instill further belief in that culture, especially when they feel like they're a part of where that culture is going. And they also, they institute a flat structure within their stores, which may or may not work. This is a particular case study. It may or may not work for you, but that's certainly something that Whole Foods has found, that they've flattened that structure, at least on the ground in their stores operations. And they also foster a sense of authenticity with their staff. And they really want their staff to feel like they can bring their authentic selves to work. So what does that mean? They don't have an office uniform. They don't have a store uniform. They allow people to express themselves, their individuality and their personality at work, and they encourage them to do so. So they feel like they are bringing their truest sense of self to the Whole Foods store that they work in every day, as opposed to leaving that version of themselves at home and bringing their business, their corporate self to the structure of the organization. So those are the key things that the study found in terms of Whole Foods, about how they have found a way to instill that belief in the culture and keep that really high retention rate.
So there's a gajillion other strategies, and we could spend a half an hour talking about all the different categories. I mean, you can really look at your onboarding or your socialization. You can look at talent recruitment. You can look at development. You can look at compensation. Gracious, there are gajillions, but we just don't have time to talk about them all today, which is why we would like to, instead of focus on those kind of brass tacks things, like for the last two strategies that we did, we're going to talk about the overall philosophy and let you take the 40,000 foot view as to what your retention strategy should be.
So if you're looking at all of these potential areas in which you could work on your retention strategy, we want to give you our philosophical approach that you can use to look at any of these, to look at recruitment, to look at talent development, to look at socialization or employee engagement. What kind of focus, what kind of intentions can you bring in order to ensure an effective approach and a pragmatic approach to employee retention? So the first thing that we found in our philosophy is that your culture needs to be adaptable. Change is happening all the time. People are coming in and out of your organization all the time, as evidenced by the very personal and very recent case study that Dr. Donnelly provided us. You can be blindsided by people leaving. But if you focus on that 40,000 foot view of making sure that your culture is adaptable to change, you're going to be ready for the changes that come, even when they're unpredictable. The second focus for our philosophy is that your leaders need to be accountable. For us, cultural resiliency means that you place responsible and authentic people in positions of leadership, that they are accountable to the value and missions of your organization, they are accountable for the strategy, and they're accountable for their mistakes, because mistakes happen and people are human, but you need to have people in leadership positions that reflect and model that accountability for the rest of your organization. And finally, for our philosophy, your organization needs to ensure that your mission and values match the business strategy. We really believe that consistency in this is key. Your employees are going to notice when it doesn't happen. We used the statistic on the previous slide, that people will notice if their values and even your stated values don't match your strategy that you're enacting in your everyday business. People are going to notice, and it's going to contribute to other problems within your culture. So that's our pragmatic approaches to employee retention. Break down our philosophy, a couple of strategic approaches we believe you can use immediately to start working on your retention. But what have we learned today? Well, certainly, we've learned from Dr. Donnelly's first case study, from her own experience, there are parts of employee retention that are out of your control. There are things that you cannot change or control with people coming and going from your organization. But we believe firmly that what you can control is the adaptability of your strategies, both business strategies and employee engagement strategies, the accountability of your leadership, and the pragmatic approaches that you take to employee engagement in terms of keeping people on board with your value-driven culture.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for watching the webinar. We hope that it was everything you dreamed and more.
Yes.
And this one was edited, of course, but we would love for you to be able to join us live for the next one, which it will have lots more interactive opportunities, time for you to ask questions, and opportunities to win prizes.
What? So how can you find out about our webinars? That's a great question.
Great question.
If you're watching this replay back on YouTube, there will be a link to sign up for our newsletter in the show notes below. If you are watching this on our website, just scroll down to the bottom of the page, sign up for the newsletter.
You'll see a box that says Research Digest and a little thing. Type your email in there and
away you go.
Away you go. We'll see you for the next one.
Follow us on all of our social media if you want to as well. We post about our upcoming webinars and all sorts of things of interest there as well. So we hope you've enjoyed this replay, and we really look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.
See you later from the Good Doctors.
Bye.